Hey, y'all, I'm Bud Elliott, and this is my college football summer school series on Cover 3. I bring on the team experts from the 24/7 sports staff and ask them the questions I care about. No fluff. Which players will be toughest to replace? What position groups are sneakily better or worse than I realize? We get you the scoop on each team in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hey, guys, welcome back to Bud Elliott College Football Summer School on the Cover 3 Podcast Network. Today, we're talking a heavy. We are talking a big hitter, USC, and to do that, I'm bringing on the foremost USC expert, Ryan Abraham, USCFootball.com, the Peristyle Podcast. Ryan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Bud. I love these things. They're fun last year, and doing these videos and seeing the Cover 3 podcast grow, it's been great. And I'm glad we get to dive deep, but, hear about Oregon or hear about NC State or whatever going through these summer school, workouts here. There's a lot of fun.
Absolutely, man. And USC is a really exciting team to talk about right now. Lincoln Riley killed it in his first year. They're 11-3, pretty much unanimously top 15 in all the power ratings. The vibes in LA right now have to be pretty off the charts.
They are, and we've got to talk to Lincoln Riley sort of, not say off the record, but we've had a couple opportunities just as beat writers talking to him. We sat down with him for about 2 hours, like after the season, in a room. That was kind of interesting. And we've had some different Zoom calls with him where more extended conversations to hear kind of what he has to say. And, he wasn't happy. He's 11 wins are fine. Like, that's obviously it's great to go from 4-8 to 11-3, but they didn't like the way they finished the season. Obviously, the defense, they didn't have the kind of depth there. They throughout the program, they didn't have the kind of depth, and they seem pretty optimistic, Bud, that they can get that right. Get the defense better. The offense is obviously amazing. You have Caleb Williams wins in the Heisman, and he's back, and first time Lincoln Riley's had a Heisman Trophy winner return, so that's kind of a new thing for him. But they got to get better on the defensive side of the ball. Their special teams was kind of bad too. But if they do that, I mean, they're just the realistic expectations are you can go to the college football playoff for the first time in USC history. So we'll see. I mean, it's a tougher schedule. I think, the Pac-12 is a lot deeper than it was. They haven't been able to get over that Utah hump. We'll see about Oregon, but Utah's really give them a lot of trouble. So we'll see. But yeah, it's the excitement's there. And I think maybe outside people are like, oh, they can be a little bit better of a team and maybe have the same record, even a little worse. That's not what they're thinking inside the program. I mean, I think they're really shooting for the sky on this one.
So we will start with the reason for that crazy optimism, and that is that they had the best offense in the country last year, and they return a large part of that, especially with Caleb Williams. 54% success rate on Caleb Williams dropbacks that's video game stuff. You just don't see that. I mean, how tempting is it for Lincoln Riley just to let him drop back every single play? Like that's crazy numbers.
It is, and I think one of the things we've seen, if you watch Riley's teams through Oklahoma, I mean, they've had 1,000-yard rushers fairly frequently. And I think he loves to complement what the quarterbacks are doing, which we've seen some crazy things from the, Kyler Murray's and Baker Mayfield's and all those guys. Caleb Williams is right up there, right, with those, but he would love to have a great running game to kind of go along with it. They haven't really worked the tight ends like they would. I think we've seen some of the other offenses in the past. It's mostly been sort of wide receivers, but they like what they have. It's a deeper group of running backs they have this year. Marshawn Lloyd coming in from South Carolina. Austin Jones, the Stanford transfers back, and they got a couple freshmen they like from Texas. So I think there's a temptation there, right, to do that. But he would love to keep this kind of, keep the defense guessing a little bit. And I think the offensive line was a little more veteran than he thought it was going to be last year. A bunch of the guys they had coming back, a lot of starts, a lot of, snaps in between between those guys. And they bring in some more transfer, a couple more transfers this year that are probably going to end up being starters. And then trying to build that offensive line though through high school recruiting, that just takes a little bit more time. So they needed guys that could play right now. So they kind of been doing that the last couple of years. But there's a temptation there. You want to drop back all the time, but he'd like to keep it a little more balanced if possible.
You mentioned that running back room. Austin Jones, they bring in Marshawn Lloyd from South Carolina, is a really tough runner. Do you put Raleek Brown in that group, or do you categorize him more in that receiver group?
So in the spring, he did a lot more work at receiver, but Lincoln Riley did say that he got nicked up a little bit. We didn't really get a lot of information on what the injury was. And because the running back room was a lot deeper than it had been in the past, they're going to miss Travis Dye. He was a tremendous leader, a great pass blocker and all that. But I think Raleek Brown he's capable of doing a lot of stuff just with the ball in his hand. So I think you're going to see him in both rooms. He'll be, lining up in the slot. I think you'll see him as a running back, but in the spring, we only saw him really as a wide receiver. And I think that's going to be kind of mixed in more come the fall. So just one of those guys, you see him, the 5-star talent and all that. Somehow, somewhere on the field, there's got to be some space, and somehow you get that guy the ball, and some crazy things are going to happen. So we saw some of the freshman stuff where he ran a little too, east-west instead of north-south. So that'll be interesting. But in the spring game, he had one where it was this one cut that just kind of went from sideways to upfield, and it was like, whoa, okay. So that you can see not a lot of people can turn like that and that quickly, and he's definitely one of those guys that can.
There are some guys on this team you would not want to have tackle in space. We'll get to one here at the receiver position. So you lose Jordan Addison, who won the Blitnikoff in 2021. He comes out to USC, slightly different role, still had a great year, still went first round. You lose Kyle Ford, but they bring in Dorian Singer from Arizona, who was one of the top receivers in the Pac-12, and we saw Zach Branch at the Under Armour game here in Orlando, where I live. Am I crazy to think there's not a drop-off here at receiver for the Trojans?
I mean, I don't think you are. Kyle Ford, I love the potential with him. He had a monster opening. It was the CJ Stroud, Bryce Young opening.
Yes.
Kyle Ford, I think, caught like 15 touchdowns that weekend. It was insane. And it's funny. They basically benched Bryce Young. CJ Stroud and Bryce Young were on the same 7-on-7 team, and Stroud was playing better by the end. So the championship game, it was more Stroud than Young, if I remember correctly. But we just never. Ford was banged up. He had a couple knee injuries and stuff. I liked him a lot, and it'll be interesting to see what he does at UCLA. And they were out. Jordan Addison was missing for a bunch of the time. We saw Brendan Rice really emerge. He had a huge. Later in the season he got really good. Jerry Rice's kid had a monster game in the Cotton Bowl. But I love what Dorian Singer brings, and he torched USC last year when they played Arizona, number 2 in receiving yards in the Pac-12 last year. So I don't think receiver is going to be an issue. I mean, you could argue it's a little better, a little worse, but there's a lot of talent in that room. A guy like Taj Washington has got better, year after year, and we haven't seen like the full potential of a Mario Williams. He'll come on early, maybe disappear for a little while, and obviously has that chemistry with Caleb Williams because they played together at Oklahoma. But it's a really deep receiver room, and Zach Branch is just one of the more exciting players that, as far as freshmen coming in, the expectation levels just couldn't be much higher for him. He's just so electric. So I think they'll be fine at receiver. I mean, you could definitely argue last year is a little more talented this year, but either one, you'd be happy with either group you'd have.
If you're at home and you don't watch our recruiting episodes and you don't follow recruiting, I'm not saying that Zach Branch is Tyreek Hill, but stylistically, I think he's probably the closest thing we've seen to Tyreek Hill. Like that guy is just absolutely scary in space. Can he return punts too? Do we know? Like is he a guy that's going to catch punts for him?
Yeah, I think the plan is to use him in special teams. I don't think they've set in stone who's going to be out there, but we got to see him doing some of the kick return drills. We don't get to watch a lot of practice, Bud, but early on you would see sort of, who's fielding punts and who's fielding kickoffs, and he was back there kind of doing that stuff. So I bet you they're going to, when you're trying to work in a freshman receiver, maybe he's not starting, whatever, and you see, he comes in second series or something, get some catches, whatever it is. But you can get those guys in special teams early sometimes, and he definitely has that potential. So it'll be interesting to see. But I kind of feel he's going to be a kick, punt return, or something like that for USC this season.
I sort of feel like the only way this offense, assuming health, doesn't maintain number 1, top 3 type status in the country would be the offensive line. They lose their left tackle, they lose their left guard, they lose their center. And if you watch the draft, 15 out of 16 offensive tackles taken were not transfers. It's a spot you really cannot get great transfers at for the most part. The only one was the guy who went from Tennessee to Oklahoma when Tennessee basically narked on their head coach to try to avoid paying the buyout, right? So that's not a typical situation. But they bring in Michael Tarquin from Florida, and I saw that Cortland Ford transferred out to Kentucky. So is it safe to assume that that's a big hit for them? Like, he kind of, am I reading it right that he took Ford's spot?
Yeah, well, Ford, so he started off kind of he started the season, but then was in a rotation. And by the end of the season, Ford just wasn't really in the mix. And they tried to get him in later in, and I'm not sure what it was. There was an injury in there, but at some point he sort of just kind of lost his job, maybe lost his way. I don't know. And, but he's a great kid, and we thought that there was a good chance he could come in and be competing, and maybe it wouldn't be the starter because they bring in Jarrett Kingston, they bring in Michael Tarquin, like you mentioned, and then they, just picking up Emmanuel Pregnon from Wyoming. So yeah, so there's a lot of people that were in on him and try to get what he would do. So Ford would have been in the mix. I don't know if he'd end up being one of the starters. They like Jonah Monheim a lot. He's moved around a little bit, but I think they feel pretty comfortable with the guys they have. I mean, Andrew Voorhees, I think, was their best offensive lineman last year, ends up getting drafted in the 7th round after tearing his ACL at the NFL Combine and still putting up 38 reps on the bench press on one leg. So I think that.
Oh, he did it at the Combine?
Yeah, he did it at the Combine and then lifted later on one leg, like I think the next day or something like that. It was crazy. It was doing one of the drills. He ends up going down. So, but if you watch like the Pro Football Focus stuff, like he was always one of the highest rated guards in the Pac-12. So he was definitely the best offensive lineman. Ford, Ford's definitely someone that can play. He started at left tackle for them. I don't think he would have this go around, but he certainly would have helped with depth. So they got some freshmen that they like coming in, but obviously the freshmen and they're working through, but it wasn't a really deep offensive line. They had a lot of bodies, just not a lot of guys that could play. Several guys from that group had retired or got processed out, I guess you could say, like when Lincoln Riley took over. They just weren't going to be, Pac-12 level sort of players that Clay Helton had on the squad. So it's an interesting mix. Justin Dietich has been there. He's a captain again. He's been there for like 8 years or something. So he's going to move over to center though, where Brett Nealon was the last few years. So they lost some veterans from last year's group for sure. They bring in some transfers. We'll see how that kind of mixes out there, but it should be a pretty good group on the offensive line.
Interesting. So not somewhere between better to maybe slightly worse than last year. We think, right? Like not a big drop off in display.
I wouldn't think so. Yeah, and it's funny because people last year when you talk about USC preseason, they'd be like, "Oh, the offensive line, defensive line sucks." I'm like, you could say that about the defensive line, even though they had like Tuli Tuipulotu like lead the nation in sacks. The offensive line, they brought a lot of. There was so much experience there, and they actually got better. It's funny. They brought in Graham Harrell, to run this spread kind of offense. And then they had Tim Drevno coaching the offensive line. It was more of like a power kind of guy. And then they bring in Clay McGuire for the last year of Clay Helton's tenure to be more of a spread offensive line coach to go with the spread offense. And the offense got a lot better. Like they were better on 3rd and 1. So I think people didn't realize in, Clay's last year, the offensive line did get a bunch better when you had like a spread coach coaching them. He's moved on to Washington State. And so I think people were sort of underselling the offensive line last year, but there was a lot of, veteran leadership, and they kind of have that too, just a few different faces.
Nice. So switching over here to the defense, again, we're talking to Ryan Abraham, USCFootball.com, the Peristyle podcast. The decision to keep Alex Grinch. So Riley is probably the best informed person to make the decision. He's worked with the guy before. He brought him with him to USC. In your estimation, like, did this defense, did it play a lot worse than its talent was, or was the performance close to the talent level?
It's a great question. And, we know you've been around a lot of coaches. Sometimes they can be stubborn about things, right? And maybe loyal to a fault. I think the jury's still out on that. I mean, if the fan base really wanted Alex Grinch to be fired. And I think you're coming from, how many years of Clay Helton, and it was just like fire was like the whole thing. It's like, you hire a guy like Lincoln Riley, and he's obviously shown he can coach. He run, the organization is just so much more well run. It's kind of like, well, you have to give that guy the benefit of the doubt. He came in and won 11 games. So I think he understands that the defense has to get a lot better. I mean, there were like the hundreds of any of those categories that you would look at. If they're a top 40 defense or something, it's a whole different story. And I feel like they have the potential to be that. And when we got to talk to Riley, that was one of the first things he said in our, we had like a 2-hour sit down with him as just beat writers after the season. And it wasn't like he was making excuses, but he was like, look, I came in and you normally have like a page of notes or something of things he had like 6 pages, like all these things from there's no nutrition program to I don't have enough offices for my guys. Like he was like, there's so many problems he had to fix. And he really was he's still calling the offense. He kind of focused on that, but he wasn't able to do sort of everything that he wanted to do. And now he can kind of look at the entire program. And they added a lot of guys in the portal last year. I think they had the number 1 portal class. They were going back and forth. But the stars were on the offensive side. There was a Jordan Addison's, Caleb Williams. They added dudes they needed on defense, but there weren't sort of like this year, like a Bear Alexander, someone like that was like they didn't add former like 5-star defensive players like they're trying to do now, or just, doing a little bit better job of that now. And he really talked about the depth being like, you had these guys up top, like outside of Tuli Tuipulotu, you just didn't really have production on the defensive line. So they had some, the starters were good, but there was a pretty big drop off. And he feels now that you have good starters, and some of those starters on the defensive line are still around, and they're not going to start anymore because you brought in better guys. So I think that's probably a good sign. But he's feeling that the gap between guys that are playing the 1s or whatever, the 2s, has shrunk a lot, and you could mix and match a little bit. So the talent should be better. They talked about some of the tackling just was really awful. I think it has to be a mix, Bud, to get back to your original question. I mean, I think they've still had enough talent. They shouldn't have been as bad as they were. And at the end of the season, I mean, they just couldn't get a stop. They got one against UCLA. Corey Foreman, makes that interception and against Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and that's the stop they needed. But that's pretty much the only one. Other times it was like if a opponent was driving down the field at the end of the game, fourth quarter, overtime, whatever, they were going to score. So that's got to change. I think a lot of it's tackling, but I think a big part of it too was sort of like the talent. And by the end of the season, guys were sort of worn out. Guys were hurt. They weren't really in there, and it hurt. I think it hurt them on the offensive line too, when you got guys getting banged up and they didn't really have anyone to sort of step in. So kind of long answer there, Bud, but I think they're optimistic for a positive, for a good reason, that they can be a lot better on defense. The proof's going to be in the pudding. If they struggle again, I mean, I don't think there's any way you could keep Alex Grinch, but Lincoln Riley's saying like, hey, it's going to be so much better. We have everyone back. We want to keep the continuity. We had to change so much when we came in. It's like, I don't want to just change something right away. We're going to let this, percolate a little bit, and then we'll see how it comes together.
It's a long answer, but it's a nuanced answer, right? Like there's a lot of things that go into this, and you have a lot of new pieces you have to integrate. And when you get in here, you don't necessarily know what you have in year one, and you're kind of learning about your personnel throughout the year too. It's a bit of a gamble to keep him, given the fact that like this is probably the last year of Caleb Williams, and you need to cash that in for something big. Otherwise, we're going to be doing this thing next year and be like, man, Ryan, they really kind of missed an opportunity to do something special with a generational player like Caleb. I'll run through some spots here that kind of just stuck out to me as concerns for the defense, and I'm kind of curious as to how you rate them as far as concerns going forward. So like pass rush off the edge in particular, like, is that something you're more confident in? Because like last year it was at times kind of not there.
Yeah, I think you got more of an interior push from Tuli Tuipulotu, and they like some of the guys they brought in. I mean, I think they're hopeful that a guy like Corey Foreman sort of probably going to be more of a defensive end than kind of that rush end spot, but that that former 5-star talent can come through and not be kind of stacked days. I think the way they described it was like he would have these great days and then you would kind of disappear for a while, and someone like that to be able to kind of have continuous progress and success, I think that he could help a lot. They really like Jamil Muhammad from Georgia State that comes in, and sometimes you get a guy like that where you're just like not that well known, and he was running with the ones for this team in the spring. So I think there's some optimism there that they can generate a little bit more of a pass rush. We'll see. Solomon Tuliaupupu has been around for a while. He's a fan favorite, just the way, I don't know, people just love him. The USC fans just really love him. He's a redshirt senior now, I believe, but he's been in there kind of playing defensive end spot and doing well too, getting some first team reps. So it should be better than what they had last year, but and they would love a guy like Romello Height to come through, the Auburn transfer. He's just kind of been hurt the whole time he's been here, but he looks the part, so they've got some options, but you got to get some production out of that spot.
Absolutely. So moving on to the interior of the defensive line, I thought USC just on paper did a great job of addressing getting more big bodies into the fold. Can you sort this out from of the transfers? Who do you think, or I guess of some of the young guys that were already on the roster who are going to emerge? Like, is Barry Alexander a no doubt starter for this team, or are there who do we think is going to comprise the main players on the interior of this defense?
So I think the first guy you brought in, like Keon Bars from Arizona, they brought in 3 dudes from Arizona. I think all 3 of them could potentially start. You mentioned Dorian Singer already, and we'll we can get to Christian Wallace later, but Bars is a senior. He's just been there, done that. Knows the Pac-12. I feel like you're going to see him, kind of out there for sure. But like a Bear Alexander, I mean, it's hard. You don't have those guys, the 6'4", 305 pounds or whatever, on the West Coast all that much. And to bring a guy like that in, he's a Arizona kid or whatever, bring someone like that to the West Coast. It's a big deal. And I think he's, there's probably, a really good chance he's going to start there. And then, they like Anthony Lucas as well, another former 5-star player they bring in, transferring in from Texas A&M. Now, those guys don't have a ton of production at the college level. We saw a little bit more of Bear Alexander's, mostly because it was a blowout in the national championship game. But, guys like that are like, okay, those 3 guys weren't on the roster last year, and they could all be starters, or in that, interior rotation. So, I think all those guys are just 1 or 2 of those guys would be an upgrade for the position. To have all 3 of them, I think it's going to help them a lot.
I think when you take a player like Bars from Arizona, it says something about like the floor of that player, because you had to play against him, and you say, wait a second, like I know what this guy did to us, and I know what our own players do to our offensive line in practice, and our guys don't do what he did, right? So like I think there is some signal to that when you take a player from inside the conference, especially if you played against a guy. Like, all right, we know there's it may not be a superstar, but there's a certain baseline of he can play at this level, which I think has to be comforting. At linebacker, I got one question for you. Is Eric Gentry healthy?
He was not in the spring, so he was mostly on a cart. They're pretty optimistic he's going to be back like later in the summer, early fall, and it'll be, he's such a weird body, he's like 6'6", and like 210 pounds or whatever, but would get into passing lanes. I don't know. Maybe they move him more outside but you got Shane Leaves in there, who's maybe like sort of limited athletically, the Alabama transfer, and Mason Cobb, I know they love. He made the lot impact trophy.
The Oklahoma State kid?
The transfer from Oklahoma State. I don't see how he's not going to start. We thought, former 4-star linebacker Rajon Davis came on later in the season, but I feel, and they love Tackett Curtis, the freshman from Louisiana, who was like the Louisiana Player of the Year or something like that. But Eric Gentry is like sort of like this X factor because he doesn't fit the mold, but they really loved what he was able to do playing like middle linebacker last year, getting in passing lanes and stuff. So if he's healthy, I mean, they should be better on the interior of the linebacker group. But he might move around too. So I'm not sure, but he should be healthy later on, but we didn't get to see him really do anything in the spring.
So only losing 1 player in the secondary, had a lot of former 4-star types. This is a position where on paper USC has recruited pretty well defensively. And then they also went to the portal, I believe, here. So is there somebody who they recruited in-house who is developed, who we expect to be a breakout star here, or any of the transfers guys that we think are really going to be studs for them? This unit's got to be better than it was last year. And they just allowed a crazy high completion percentage for the talent level they had.
You're right. And they didn't play up to their talent level. I think Kalen Bullock is a, first team all Pac-12 kind of player. So, seeing him there, he's got a lot bigger. Talked to Lincoln Riley about him. He was, I forget, he was like 167 pounds, and now he's like 190. And he looks like a whole different player out there. Certainly been one of the leaders at safety. And they love, Christian Wallace came in from Arizona, one of the trio of guys that came in from Arizona. He was banged up for the beginning part of spring, but you kind of saw some of that potential. He looks like he's a well-built cornerback, along with Washington transfer Jacoby Covington, he had 2 interceptions in the spring game. Washington, if you remember 2 years ago, like their secondary was really good, and Covington was sort of like the guy that was like next in line, who would play a little bit. And before it was like his turn, he ends up transferred to USC. Didn't do a ton, but then he came on a little bit later last year, and he's looked like he's going to be a whole different player for them. They like him a lot. But Damani Jackson is the guy, the former, 5-star modern day kid. And, he'd been banged up, and now he's healthy. We got to talk to him, really for the first time this spring, and the way he was kind of describing his rehab and all that stuff, coming back from everything. There's a lot of optimism, I think, just around him and his potential there. But it's a deep group in the secondary. They bring in a lot of dudes that, guys coming back, guys that transfer in, guys that seemed like they've developed over the last year that maybe they weren't stud last year. They could be one this year. So you're right, but they got to be a lot better than what they were. You know, there was a lot of penalties. You know, they did get a lot of turnover last year, and there was a bunch of interceptions forced, and some of it was some of the pass rush and forcing things, but they got to try to keep that up. But I think the tackling and the be able to help support, stopping the run and all that, along with like too many passes that were caught last year, you can't have that kind of high of completion percentage and be a really good secondary. So they got the bodies there. Like, I don't think there's any excuse if the secondary is bad, it's something else. It's not the players, because they got a lot of guys there that can play.
No doubt, competition will be really fierce. So Ryan, other than quarterback, because that's kind of a cheating answer here, what is the one position group where the gap between the starters and the backups is huge, and so they have to stay healthy?
Oh, that's a good question. I probably would go with the offensive line, just because it's sort of like you got these veterans again, second year. Well, you bring in some of these transfers to sort of replace the veterans from last year, mostly because they had to kind of process some of those younger offensive linemen that just weren't going to play out of the program. And they like the guys that come in. I think they have 5 true freshmen on the roster right now, but they're all sort of true freshmen, and maybe 1 or 2 are going to contribute. But last year there was sort of like 6, 7 guys deep, and it might be maybe 7, 8 guys this year. But if you lose like a Justin Dedich at center, I mean, it might be a pretty big drop off. He's a veteran, he's a captain, really the only guy with experience snapping the ball. So there's some positions, I think, on the offensive line that would hurt you. Like a guy like Jonah Monheim's pretty versatile. Like, we've seen Dedich play different spots too, but I think that's one where they got pretty good talent, but maybe the depth isn't there yet. By the end of the year, maybe it is. Maybe some of those freshmen are ready. But for me, that would be the one I would pick. That if it'd be tough to lose a couple of those veteran offensive linemen without an obvious replacement behind them.
That's a pretty popular answer so far in the series. And I think a lot of it is just the transfer portal, right? Like a guy like Ford going to Kentucky. I mean, like, he would be a great backup to have on your team 4 or 5 years ago before the portal was a thing. But now, like, a guy who is a 300-pounder who's played some college snaps and has not been terrible has a lot of value in the portal market. So it's hard to keep good O-line depth now, really, for pretty much any school out there. So got a question, kind of like extended preseason type thing. I mean, looking at USC's schedule here, they get to play, in my estimation, the 5 worst teams in the Pac-12, which most teams don't get to do. So you get both Arizona schools, Stanford, Colorado, and Cal. If you want to tell me Washington State's worse than one of those, I guess maybe, but like, that's pretty much the consensus bottom 5 of the league. And they get all but one of those games really early in the schedule before playing a very difficult final 6 weeks. With all the new pieces and the transfer portal stuff they brought in, like, how much mixing and matching and experimentation do we think we're going to see out of this team in the first, like, really before Halloween?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, if I can spit that out there, because it is a backloaded schedule. And if there are different position battles or anything where you're just not sure, like, who's going to end up being the bell cow running back or whatever it is, you could do that pretty early on in the schedule, because you're right. I mean, I wouldn't put Washington State below any of those teams. I think Arizona State can be better for sure, but it's year one of a rebuild. Arizona, I think they can be a bowl team this year. I mean, I think Jed Fish is, they've added I think they added a bunch of guys on the defensive line. They lost some of their best players to USC, but you feel like he's been building that over the last few years, and they can definitely be better. But that's going to be the weakest group, I think, throughout the Pac-12. So you have an opportunity to kind of build things up, get things right. And if you're tinkering with things on the defensive side, just schematic wise, like if you're just doing some different things, you can feel feel that out and see what it's coming like, toward the end of the season. So I think there's an opportunity. I mean, they're probably not going to approach it that way where there's, we're going to like preseason game this or anything, but you can definitely build up some momentum and get some really good feedback and really good data about the guys you have, and make some, if you need to make some changes going into the latter half of the schedule, that's where your bread's going to be buttered in 2023. If you're going to make a run at the college football playoff, you're going to win the Pac-12, it's going to be because you did well in that back half of the schedule, which is loaded and very tough.
So last year, USC had, I think, if you kind of just put all the different elements into the mix, a bottom 20 nationally special teams unit. And sometimes that's because you don't have like bottom half of the roster athleticism? Like some of the dudes you have to play out there aren't very athletic, or sometimes it's just lack of attention to detail or not getting the guys to care about it. A, what do you attribute that to? And B, do you think it's going to be better this year?
Yeah, I think B first. I think it's going to be better. There's a lot of criticism, USC fans, and I've always harped on special teams. Like USC over the years would have kind of a bad special team coach and a lot of guys on special teams like scholarships, and you're like, there's such a waste of resources. Like you're not even good, and you have a dedicated coach and a whole bunch of guys on scholarship. They got 2 scholarship special team guys now. And they don't have a dedicated special teams coach. And Lincoln Riley said, hey, we're not going to do that. It's more of a, everyone kind of has their assignment and stuff. But, they were bringing in an Australian punter last year, and he ends up not getting into school or something. And he ends up disappearing. They add someone at the last minute, Aiden Sleep-Dalton. He was just sort of like a guy. But now they bring in Eddie Toplinski from Arizona State, who was an all Pac-12 punter, and he can kick and stuff too. And they got a couple kickers and stuff. I feel like kicking, putting, they'll be better. They weren't bad at kicking last year. They didn't get a lot. They didn't have a very good percentage of kickoffs, that weren't returned. So I think that's something they're trying to address. And they weren't very good at punting. You bring in the best punter in the Pac-12, that's probably going to help with that. And they got enough athletes. I think they can do better in the return game. But they weren't really good at that either. So that could be the return stuff. And some of the protections. I feel like that could be when you don't have a dedicated special teams coach. It's not necessarily like showing the kicker what he needs to do. It's just you have someone overseeing like all of it. Like here's what our philosophy is for punt coverage, punt return, all of that kind of stuff. So we'll see if that gets better. But I feel like they'll be better just with the specialists this year. And that should help a lot with some of that. But they were, I would know what the numbers were as far as like bottom 20 or whatever. But that seems about right. They weren't very effective on special teams. And sometimes you just put, that or the defense put Caleb Williams in a really tough spot. And most of the times he could still go out and do it, but you'd rather not if he doesn't have to.
No doubt about it. And we've had a couple episodes so far where schools had not first-time head coaches, but coaches in their first year at a new program. And it seems to be maybe just something not falls by the wayside, but it's not quite as important as getting the offense right and the defense right in year one. So that kind of makes sense. Ryan, I really appreciate the time, man. This has been awesome. Ryan Abraham, USCFootball.com, the Peristyle Podcast. We'll have to get you back on maybe week 4 or 5 after they've played some of that little bit lighter Pac-12 schedule and see what our thoughts are on USC for that difficult stretch run and see if Caleb Williams can go back-to-back with the Heisman.
I would love to, buddy. You guys do a great job, and I appreciate coming on. It's fun. I mean, talking college football in May, getting all serious about the depth chart and everything. Like, yeah, that's what we got to do. You always have the people ask you, right? Like, what do you do in the off season? You're like, there's no off season. There's always stuff you could talk about.
Exactly right.